Finally back at it again with Naruto, and I'm excited to be jumping into Shippuden fresh. We have a 2.5 year time skip to work through, and we're going to be looking at a ton of feats, so bear with me. Something I'll be trying to keep in check is in comparison to what is shown at the highest end for part 1, and that's the AP coming in at this many joules per centimeter cubed, or enough energy to destroy a lower end small building, and speed coming in at Mach 3 plus for movement, as well as Mach 2.1 plus for combat. Interestingly, if you remember, each benchmark there is held by a different character, and if you haven't seen the previous videos covering those, like the actual scaling there, I'd suggest checking it out. It's broken down, it's in depth, and you'll have more context with those numbers. With that out of the way, let's look at how the characters have grown. With that, if you remember, Sakura and Naruto face off against Kakashi again to see their progress. And it's here where we see Sakura showcase some, and I mean only some, of her striking force. This isn't her full power, as we'll see later, but what we are seeing is this amount of rock being fractured, putting the total force at a total of this many joules, or we're talking about an extreme low end of building level. Given her hand size, this puts her AP to be at this many joules per centimeter cubed, or higher mid-end wall level. That is above part 1 Rasengan. I'm talking about the one where he with the water tank feat. So that is a pretty good start to Shippuden scaling. Of course, things progress in the story, and the next feat I'd like to bring up is Naruto's Odama Rasengan, while in his Zero Tails form. What we see is a couple of things I'd like to make very apparent. First, there is a mixture of cratering and fragmenting happening there. Given cratering is much higher than fragmenting in energy output, I'll be treating the entire thing as cratering, however, and this is because this feat simply is in no way close to a feat worth using as a measuring stick to other things, and I don't want to downplay the feat. Second, and most importantly, is that the attack in no way makes contact with the ground despite its destruction, with an unknown amount of force not going into the destruction. Lastly, as the name suggests, it's a large Rasengan, and that will of course factor into the AP. All of this meaning I don't want to downplay it. It's not going to be one of the most important feats regardless, and it is still clear cratering at the end of the day. So let's dissect this. What we're looking at is cratering of Earth of around this many cubic centimeters by an attack with a volume of around this many cubic centimeters, which is putting the total force at this many joules, or we're talking a high-ish end large building level, and with the attack's volume putting the AP at around this many joules per centimeter cubed, or we're talking street level joules per centimeter cubed. These are the numbers. That said, when we're looking at the numbers I just brought up, you can see them on the screen, due to the feat being the kind it is, because obviously this puts it vastly weaker than, say, even Sakura's casual punch, you have to realize that a lot of it could simply be due to the ambient energy. If we were to take it at the level of air pressure, I'm talking about the ambient energy, just not the main force, but the energy just coming off of the main force hitting something else, such as a direct punch and the air pressure destroying everything else for it. If we were to take the ambient energy and the feat itself to be as if it was so much weaker than the main force, in likeness to air pressure to a direct hit, we would be expecting instead such that the actual AP could be as high as this many joules per centimeter cubed, or wall level. Once we see it do a full hit of destruction, we can actually calc it with accuracy. But until then, this is what is shown. It's even if we took it with the ambient energy route, we're talking about merely 20% as potent as Sakura's direct punch hitting you, just from what we can calc. That's it. Sadly, we don't get to see it. I'm talking in circles. You get the idea. I hope it's clear. Obviously, I'm not saying his Odama Rasengan is weaker than Sakura, but it's coming from scaling only, not actually calcing. Next, That's 1 feat for Sakura, 1 feat for Naruto. The next person, if you guessed Sasori, then you win. So let's look at one of his best feats we can calc, and that's his giant iron sand spike violently fragmenting the ground. In this scan, you can see Sakura extremely clearly, at a good angle, and right in the center of the shot. Which goes with a good angle, but doesn't always necessarily mean the right center. We have all of it. With this, we can find that the amount of rock destroyed this way is around this many cubic centimeters, and via the type of destruction, we can expect a total force of around this many joules, or we're talking large building level force, which would put the AP at, well, much lower than Sakura's not even full power punch, to be honest. Things are looking pretty up for Sakura and her scaling. In fact, let's look at Sakura's next amazing feat. Maybe I should title this based on Sakura alone, because she does really good in this section of the manga. So yeah, see this enormous block of iron sand? Yeah, Sakura punches that and causes this damage here, with just the kinetic energy that sent it flying. This also wouldn't show her full force, and yet this has the potential to be only outdone by the Four Tails Biju Bomb. And by what I'm saying is, it's just the kinetic energy of what she applied to the object, and then the object having to actually use what was left over from that kinetic force to do what it did. Like, that wasn't her hitting the wall, mind you. This was transfer of energy into transfer of energy, not just a single time. This was really, really top tier feat for her. So, if you get the idea there, it's clear that the iron hits the wall. You can see the cratering, and you can see, very clear showings that the wall is fragmenting. The problem is that we then cut to Kakashi and Naruto before we can see the rest of the destruction, if there is any. And they're chasing Deidara before we see this. Because this is what's next. This right here is the very next panel as soon as we come back to Sakura. So we have to ask ourselves, what caused that? Has time passed? Have they been fighting for a while? Rather, has there been fighting to allow that destruction while we followed Naruto? Well, based on everything I'd seen, from their positions to what's said, in contrast to what's shown, and the feat itself lending to the final showing of the destruction, I can only say it would in fact be most accurate, showing that Sakura's punch in fact caused this amount of destruction. Not simply the first moments we could see of the destruction. And that's big. That's extremely big. If we simply calc to the force of what we see initially, we're only going to see a total force of around large building level. This actually does make sense based on her holding back feat we showed earlier, but that doesn't dictate how much she was holding back, nor how much stronger she's allowed to have gotten within a time skip. Because if we say she in fact destroyed this much here, we're looking instead at an astounding this many joules, or low-end small town level total force. Maybe this is too much, maybe there was some extra fighting, but the only thing that shows time passage is the fact that Sasori is back on the ground and not on the wall at this time. Besides that, nothing. And a lot of their statements don't hold and are backed by not just what has been happening, but what actually, like, their placements, where they are. They are literally all in the same exact spot. That would be quite the hell of a coincidence on top of it. So pseudo-backing the statement a bit, it just seems with everything to be more consistent. Again, especially watching, as we could see that it cratered in and was fragmenting the wall. It doesn't take a big leap of faith that it then all fractured and fell apart as we see it here. So that's where I take it as most accurate. It could be wrong, but when both options are viable, while I want to take whatever is the smallest end for must at least be, not when it detrimentally affects on a degree to where we have to hit what is most accurately actually being conveyed. And in this case, I believe the feats suggest the accuracy such that it was her feat that caused this total amount of destruction I can show. A lot of it is just I want to be very clear in my justifications for things. Call me out if it seems like I'm not being consistent. Absolutely, I'm always ready for that talk. But getting back to Sakura's amazing feat. Again, the total force is looking at this many joules or low-end small town level force. And the AP is at an incredible this many joules per centimeter cubed, or we're talking high-end large building level AP. That is intense, and so to not be outdone, I'll finish the video with Naruto and his 3 and 4 tail feats. Starting off with the 3 tails, which goes directly into the 4 tails feat, we see him create a crater around him simply in charging power. One thing I've seen people try to do is take the crater's depth, such that the depth is as deep as it is wide, as if it's in fact a perfect half sphere or something. I don't know. What I'll show later is the much more accurate showing of the depth, as there are definitely conflicting shots, but for now, what I can tell you is that at minimum, he cratered around this many cubic centimeters of rock, giving us a total force of this many joules, or mid-city block level. Damn, not bad. The AP, however, is a complete unknown. But we know it's weaker than anything 4 tails puts out, so we'll move on to those, because those can kind of be the rubrics. And so with the 4 tails, as he gathers even more power, we can see his chakra go so far into the sky that it not only eclipses size height, like flying, but shows to be among the clouds, albeit small in terms of length and width. That height is no joke. However, it's with all this power and chakra culminating that we get this crater to happen. And here's what I want to show you. People take the depth to be something like, I've seen as much as, 40 plus meters deep and such. And I'll put it this way. There's about 2 different scans that would support that. And every other scan that supports the vast opposite. Let me just kind of cycle through them as I'm talking here. Take a look. Just look at all of these constant, in-your-face, different angles, viewpoints that suggest vastly different than it being even close to 40 meters deep. It is not even close. Again, there are some shots that can kind of support that. But the hyper consistent showing is that it is not even close to that. So just as I took what could be the higher end for Sakura due to what seems the vastly more consistent, this is going to lower the number based on people who took the depth to be something what I see as absurd. But I am being consistent here. The scans show a consistency, the higher accuracy, if you will, in the depth being much lower. And so that's what we'll be using. That is what I based it on, is an accuracy-based take on the actual depth, suggesting that the crater in total has a volume such that this many centimeters cubed minus the volume of the 3-tail crater that was made at this many centimeters cubed, because we have to subtract that from the new feat, because that obviously was not affected. That crater remains the same. That volume is not going to be a part of this feat, obviously so, which leaves us with this many centimeters cubed of rock that is newly cratered. I have also seen many not factor in the fact that the entire previous crater would not factor into the new feat, but all that said, still very impressive, as it's a show of this many total joules, or we're talking lower end small town level. As for the AP, well, that chakra column was massive, make no mistake, showing a volume range of this many cubic centimeters to this many cubic centimeters, and that's a lot. So don't be astounded when I tell you that that puts the AP at an extremely low amount. We're talking a merely this many joules per centimeter cubed range. But look, As always, I'm upfront, and this used more guesswork than I liked, and I don't feel confident that the volume of chakra can be found within too reasonable of a sense. The AP is extremely difficult to be accurate with due to this, and I went with basic cloud heights to factor in the extreme mass of chakra that it would have been. That went to the clouds factoring in. We also saw the height eclipse psi. I mean, there is reasoning behind what I was using, obviously so, but I'm not confident this was done well enough for AP. The total energy, I will say, however, is fine. That's absolute. Luckily, for both the cratering feats that I just covered, they both are not the benchmark feats, because they are both definitely weaker than the Four Tails best feat. So finally we can see the Four Tails best feat. We're talking about his Chakra Blast versus Orochimaru. So let's finish this AP section here. What we see in destruction in this feat is a cratering total of around this many cubic centimeters of rock, totaling in with a force of at least this many joules, or we're talking low-end town level force. That said, once more, the volume of the entire blast is larger than just the amount destroyed. The AP is extremely low due to this, in terms of calcing, not scaling, mind you. However, the AoE we saw is not the condensed chakra we saw, that he actually charge up and he shoots out. I've done this feat before and I've taken it as like an idea, maybe it vaporized his gates. I'm not sold on that anymore. We don't really get to see the destruction. So this is a case where we can have anything that proves that vaporization really took place. As such, I can, once again, I need to default to the minimum. He at least can destroy what we see him destroy, which does suck for this feat. But I am going to try and, go up with the scaling and give some handouts in what we can do for calcing this. So we see the condensed chakra, not just condense itself, but we also see actually, as it's being shot out, we see it physically there. It's not just the massive AoE that annihilates all of the land that we saw there. It actually is its own little self as well that we see spiraling towards the gates, as you can see in that one little panel there. If we assume that in fact that condensed chakra carried a total force equal to the destruction we saw in just its tiny volume, then that would then, at a volume of but slightly more than 33 centimeters cubed, would have, it would be showing an AP at instead this many joules per centimeter cubed, or finally multi-city block joules per centimeter cubed, which does actually scale in a consistent manner. But again, this is potentially iffy. The idea being, once more, that the destruction shown would have been the ambient energy of that condensed part, as we can see the energy surrounding that part. And it would make sense that the actual part itself, the condensed energy itself, would be stronger than just the energy leaking around from it, right? So, to be very clear here, no, this doesn't actually show what I'm saying here with the ambient energy. The feat doesn't actually show or prove in any way that the condensed chakra ball's AP is in fact equal to the total force of what's shown. Again, the multi-city block AP is assuming the total destruction was merely ambient energy, and that therefore the small ball of space is greater than the shown force. But if you take it as such, and I believe that there's scaling, and I also, the reason I want to go for this is I believe that there's other feats that can suggest that this would be how it would scale. If you take it as such, then you also need to consider it would be extremely safe to take it such that the gates blocked like a third to half the damage we can even calc. Factor that in too. The AP could actually range from around this many joules per centimeter cubed to this many joules per centimeter cubed, or we're talking higher end multi-city block level joules per centimeter cubed, either way, on the high end of that multi-city block. Dang, so that's where it could be going, and I hope that begins to put things into perspective. Now, to leave on some speed, however, I'll quickly touch on 2 speed feats that happened up to chapter 300 that were worth anything at all. A Minato speed calc, and Guy's morning peacock. First, look at this feat though. You can see a great distance between Minato and the shinobi hiding, and then consider this. Before that bag drops, that little minuscule distance, he's there behind the shinobi already. Look at that feat. Factoring in basic approach to terminal velocity by that bag, and we're looking at a Mach 17.6 feet from Minato. That's not bad at all. I know it's Minato, who's vastly superior to everyone at this point and has much better feats, but as of what I've covered thus far, this is, casually, absolutely casually, already around 5.874 times faster, nearly 6 times faster than weightlessly using all the gates he can. That's nice. And so for Guy, to do what he did, and in looking around to find the friction and combustion for that kind of feat, it seems to be a range of around Mach 2.2 to Mach 6 for the punches. Given Neji could already potentially have a Mach 2.1 combat speed when he ran all the way to take out Kidomaru, and when he had been approaching the terminal velocity type falling, and took him out to completely seal potentially up to Mach 2.1 combat speed for Neji already. Given everything that we've seen in terms of friction stuff, I would say it would be most likely to be between the 2 numbers of the Mach 2.2 to Mach 6, giving us also the highest combat speed seen thus far as well. And that'll nearly do it for this video. Lastly, I just want to direct your attention. You can see here the differences in power and speed now from what we've seen, all the way from now part 1 that has been covered to here that's been covered in this video now for part 2 in Shippuden. Obviously, I'll be covering more as we keep going. I know that there was other things like people want to have seen, like, what about Deidara's C3 feat against Gaara? And that is a feat that there's just not the destruction that I could be able to reliably use. I could use fireball size like calculator, though we don't get a great angle of it, for me to try and guesstimate it, but that means of like trying to get an idea of it isn't actually going to get you the total yield you would really think. It's not going to be impressive going off of that. So unless I could find the method, I don't want to just botch it just trying to have the calc there, okay? So here you can once again see the comparisons between part 1 and where we are current. That'll do it for this video officially now. So if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments below. Tell me what you think with everything that it's been covered, and consider subscribing for more videos. I hope to see you in the next video, and ciao.
Pastor.